Welcome to the next video in the series using the Magic Blackboard. Yes, if you missed my first one, do check it out. Brand new video series, not the Magic Whiteboard like you're used to, but the Magic Blackboard. And this is all about answering your questions that you've got around pitching and presenting. Now, the question that we're answering today is, how do I make a great first impression? Now, this comes down to not only formal presentations, but also when we're meeting new people and presenting ourselves in front of others. Now, to do this, I'm going to be using a character who I've brought to life before, but really bringing her to life on the Magic Blackboard this time as well. So let's bring in the Magic Blackboard, and here we go. So the character who is being brought to life today is Fiona. Let's hope that you can see this. So Fiona is our first impressions Fiona character. Now, if we follow what Fiona does to make a great first impression, then we're going to be showing up and hopefully having this great impression to whoever we meet and whoever we're presenting to. So let's go through each of the tips. The first one is to focus. And this is meaning focusing on the other person we're speaking to, the audience that we're speaking to. If we can make sure we're focusing our attention on them, that's going to make it as much more impactful as possible when we're showing up. So for example, we want to make sure that we're doing our research on the other person and on our audience before we're showing up and meeting them and presenting to them. So who are they? What do they do? What level of understanding might they have on the topic that we're talking about? Focus your attention on the other person, do some research. That's the first thing that's going to help make for a great first impression as well. The I then gets into when we're actually in presentation mode or meeting mode. And you might have heard of this technique before. This is more when we might be pitching one-to-one, or maybe meeting someone one-to-one or a couple of different people, more so for a smaller audience than a larger audience. And that's to imitate the other person. So you might have heard of the idea that we mirror other people to build rapport. Sometimes this comes quite naturally. If there's quite a natural connection there, we might subconsciously find ourselves mirroring the other person's body language, for example. So if we can start to imitate them, it just helps build this rapport a little bit more. So it might be things like making sure we're facing them. If it's in a sit-down meeting, as I said, this is more for sort of smaller meetings, this one, rather than sort of big presentations. It's going to be very difficult to imitate your whole audience in front of you when you're there up on the stage standing. But mirroring, that mirror technique, can be really useful sometimes. So imitate the other person, especially if you're pitching or presenting to someone one-to-one, meeting someone for the first time. The O is then, and this goes for any type of presentation or meeting, is to prepare your opening line, prepare your opening conversation tactics or techniques. So if it is a smaller group, if it is just one-to-one, for example, thinking about what you're going to open with, something, it might be as simple as, how's your day going? Maybe have some questions that you want to throw their way early on so you can build that rapport as well. But trying to think, especially when it's more formal presentations, and you might have seen a video that I've spoken about before in terms of knowing where you're taking off when you're presenting, try to really rehearse exactly what you're going to say at the opening point of your presentation. It's going to help with nerves, which we spoke about in the previous video as well, but it's also going to make sure that you get off on the right foot and create this great first impression that we're speaking about. So preparing your opening line so you can start as strong as possible, but also preparing some opening questions, conversation topics, if it's more of a meeting scenario that you're in as well. The N, if I can fit this one in before impacting Fiona, there we go, just about, is focusing on your non-verbal communication. There's a lot of different videos that I've got that focus on different types of body language. That's what we're talking about here, is the non-verbal communication, because our actions and our body language make much more impact than just what we say. And again, it's a point that I hammer home as much as possible. Really think about your non-verbal communication. When you're standing there presenting, especially if we're going back to in-person presentations soon, but this applies online as well. Thinking about what you're doing with your hand gestures. Are you making eye contact with your audience? How are you standing? How's your posture? All of these things come into it. What are your facial expressions like? Are you smiling? What's the tone of the presentation, so you can match your non-verbal communication with the message that you're putting across as well. Exactly the same with meetings and one-to-one sort of presentations as well, sort of something that's more informal. Really thinking about how we're getting our message across, showing our passion for what we're talking about. It does come into it. So pay attention to your non-verbal communication, because that's going to really help with this first impression. And finally, the A is to make sure you're taking action after your presentation or meeting. It sounds really obvious, but it's one that I've put in there because that's going to help continue this first impression. Yes, we might think first impression is sort of that, 10 seconds that someone meets us. We want to get that first 10 seconds right, absolutely. But we want to continue that good impression that hopefully we've made with all of this stuff going on by following up as best as possible. So maybe it's following up with our audience if we've got the mailing list, for example, people that might come up to us after a presentation, giving us their card, wanting us to follow up with some information. One-to-one, really easy, dropping them an email or a message afterwards, connect on LinkedIn, just some sort of action that keeps that conversation going and maintains that good first impression. So these are sort of, 5 fundamental things to think about that we might not think about, we might do naturally, but actually giving it a bit more attention can help with that first impression. So focusing on our audience and the people that we're meeting, trying to imitate them where we can, more for smaller groups, but that mirroring technique to build that rapport. Really thinking about how we're opening our presentations, and then on the flip side of that, having some opening conversation openers, if you like. Focusing on our non-verbal communication and taking action. That's, I would say, a little bit of a starting point for making a great first impression. See how you go with that, and I'll catch you on the next video soon. If you found this video useful, check out even more ways to upgrade your impact by subscribing to my YouTube channel.